Hi, my name is Michael, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the dialects of Planetfall. Okay, point one. Languages shift, languages change, languages adapt. And you can see this very obviously. American English is a very different thing from British English, is a very different thing from South African English, is a very different thing from English learned in different parts of the world, so-called formal English. But the thing is, even modern British English has nothing to do with the British English used a century ago, 2 centuries ago. American English has nothing to do now with, well, it's something to do, but it's very different from the English spoken 2 centuries ago, and so on. Just trying to read Shakespeare is an exercise in difficulty, and that was only 400 or 500 years ago. It's still the same language, but it's changed so much. English does that. It changes regionally, it changes over time, more than most any other language. The Planetfall setting is nearly 2 centuries beyond the present day. Because of that, the English is probably very, very, very different than the English you speak now. You can track the linguistic shift, and it's getting faster and faster as time goes on, or at least we're just getting better at recording it. The thing is, we have to accept that the players don't know what that English is going to... No one really knows what English is going to look like in 200 years. So we kind of have to accept that there's a little bit of something called translation convention in there. And translation convention basically states that the language you're hearing is recognized to be not the language they're speaking. Anytime you see a period piece movie that takes place in somewhere other than, like, Victorian England, you're dealing with translation convention. A way to make the setting a little more real is, instead of trying to go, oh, we have to speak this different language because no one's going to understand you, is to just kind of adapt it a bit. Adapt what you're speaking to the linguistic shifts of the day. We know a little bit of it because Matt and Riley have developed the game's history, and we know kind of a bit of the linguistic shift, and we can use a bit of that to make the game feel a little bit more real. Slang is a great thing for language, and it's a great thing for just adding to your language to make the setting feel more real. Science fiction writers do that all the time. Read Neuromancer sometime, which you should do that anyway. But just throw these out there every now and again, and you can really make the setting feel a little more real. One side of slang is that, one, it generally makes frightening amounts of sense, and the other is that it's almost always used to denote in-group or out-group. One example of that is chromes or chrome jobs, which people use to refer to transhumanists, and meat jobs or trogs, which transhumanists use to refer to everyone else. And I like the word trog a lot. It's short for troglodyte, which means caveman or cave dweller, so there's a real amount of derision there. Beyond that, you have gnomes, people who work for games and numbers. You have bangmen, people who, Unification Forces officers. Low-docs, unlicensed doctors, usually working in the black sectors of the administrative zones. Low rates, which are usually the people that live there. Utopians, or anyone with a particularly low mimetic fitness. Singers for Singaporeans. Triples or trips for Triad Corporation, for Triad contractors, you have Penny Sam, which is Penny Samurai, and it's in general, the word itself implies mercenary, and but in general it just means a Triad Corporation independent contractor. You have the Hueys, people who work for United Earth Authority, UE, Huey. And those are all just examples of some of the general slang. Singlish structure is a little bit different from English structure. It's not quite English, it's a Creole. It's a blend of English and Malay and Chinese, particularly Cantonese Chinese, and a little bit of Japanese, but it's mostly English. There's a lot of loanwords, though, but the important bit is getting the sound, and the thing with Singlish is, one, the grammar is a lot simpler than English. It's simplified, like most Creoles, Things like the helping words like will or I am either get simplified to their base form, or just removed entirely. Another thing is the loan words, and some of those loan words are more structural. Some of them are just kind of like replacements. One of the big ones is structurally is la, and it's kind of one of those constant use things, and it's used to either intensify or remove emphasis from a sentence, depending on tone of voice. We go there la. Like, we're going over there now. And if you noticed, when I said that, I used a little bit of like kind of the flatter Asian inflection. And I know I didn't do that incredibly well, but I've never really sat down and learned an Asian language, so that makes it a little more difficult. But that's part of what you can do, is add a little bit of that accent. But like I said, if you can use la to de-emphasize, I would, but I really can't la. Like, I really can't go, sorry. Removing emphasis. The other side of that is which, if la, the harder form of la, is a verbal version of an exclamation point, is the verbal version of a question mark. Because Asian languages don't use inflection to indicate a question, they use like parts of speech. Where you come from, where do you come from? That's how you'd say that in Singlish. Another structural one is junbo, and that's kind of how you ask for confirmation. Like, this food from him, junbo? Does this food come from him? Yes or no? Can you confirm it? You confirm it by saying at the beginning of the reply, jun. Like junya, like jun. Yes, yeah, it came from him. Some of the loan words are things like correct, which is correct and right, but it's both yes, this is correct, and also awesome, good job. Gabra is the English version of staffu. It's all gabra. Gundu is an idiot, and it's a bit rude, but when someone's being an idiot, you call them on being an idiot, and you call them gundu. If you're calling something silly or foolish, you use suku. Masak is kind of just offhand easy. Something is just not worth considering because it is easy. It's child's play. If you want to ask a question that needs an opinion or input instead of confirmation, like you would with Jun, you just say or. We do this in English a little bit. Like, you want to go to Taco Bell, and you kind of have that implied you want to go somewhere else. But this is a little more broad in Singlish. What should we do? Or you're wanting opinion, you're wanting input, and that's how you indicate that. Like I said earlier, the accent is a little bit different. You simplify your grammar a little bit, and you kind of have that kind of a little more even. But here's the thing. Unless your character is actually from Singapore or one of the areas kind of directly surrounding it, you're probably not going to need the full accent. That said, the words used, the loan words, things like la, na, and or, those have kind of bled out into the rest of the language. So you may not use the full language or the full structure, but definitely using those kind of things would definitely make you sound like you're from the Planetfall Earth. Korai! Mars was founded, it was pretty much the first outworld colony that wasn't like just a mining facility. It's like an active colony. It was founded by like Europeans, the future version of the ESA, I guess. Because of that, the influences on its version of English aren't from Asia, they're from Europe. Thing is, you also have South Africa involved in there as well. Because of that, its grammar structure is still standard English, but there's a lot of loan words and the tone is a bit different. I'm going to talk a little bit about the accent, because it's actually, it took me a while to figure it out. You have a little bit of that British drop, and a little bit of the way they pronounce their vowels, the overarching O, but at the same time, you have a bit of the German, Dutch, Afrikaans influence, and a little bit of the French. I find it easier to focus on the R's if they come at the end of a word, or like right after a vowel. They get depressed, just like in British English. If they come after a consonant, they get a bit of a flick. And L's get a similar treatment regarding the flick. And that's the German and French influence in the language. Some of the slang that develops, it's developed out of loanwords from all of the different languages. Like from French you have connard, which is, don't call someone a connard. It's there if you want to use it, but at the same time, that's the mother version. It's, people will respond to it as if you had sworn at them, because you have. Another insult word is Wichser, and it's the German version of the British wanker. And again, it can be meant in good fun, but if you insult someone with it, they will be insulted, because you have insulted them. On the other side of that, you have gek, which is a Afrikaans term meaning crazy, insane. Have you gone gek? Another word is grasgieren, and that's someone who has become absolutely fixated on something to the detriment of everything else. Focusing on something is not bad, but when you focus on something to the exclusion of everything else, you become grasgieren, which literally means grass-headed, which came from the people working on terraforming projects, and they become obsessed with the projects because it consumes them. I mean, many of the people on Mars are scientists, and they get caught up in their work, and then they start forgetting to eat. One of my favorites is Nuskrigeid, and Nuskrigeid is a knick-knack, a curiosity, something that may be pretty or interesting, but not particularly useful for anything. Now, speaking of useless, Ludelo is a word used to denote Earth. Problem is, there's Earth and then there's Ludelo. Ludelo is the kind of term you use when the Earth sent a shipment of parts, but they sent the wrong shipment, and it's Earth. It happens. That's Ludelo. There's a little bit of derision, and it's also kind of poetic in a way because it's so far away. It's kind of got a distance to it. If you want to tell someone to calm down, settle down, like stop freaking out, on se calma, which is actually French, but you pronounce it almost as if it's Italian. So that's another bit of the linguistics. Stoff. Stoff is sand. Not sand like the kind you find in a sandbox, but finer than that. It's the stuff that blows when there's a sandstorm. The stuff that gets picked up and blown long distances. The stuff that gets everywhere. It's gritty and awful and clogs up everything. Speaking of sandstorm, you have Stoffsalz, which is a sandstorm. On Mars, there's sandstorms, and then there is Stoffsalz, which is the planet-wide sandstorm that kicks itself up every few years. And that really is a thing. Those planet-wide sandstorms do happen on Mars. The last term is bonfall, which a bonfall is a useful failure, something that a project that dead-ended, or it did not go as intended, or a result that didn't work. But it's not useless. It's a dead end that can be used to explore other avenues. I think of silly putty or superglue. Silly putty was an attempt to create useful artificial rubber for tires. It turned out to be useless for that, but it's useful as a toy. That's a bonfall. And I'm going to continue to develop the accent itself on Martian, and I realize it probably sounds very odd, more like a vague attempt at a very bad attempt at a British accent, but it is a work in progress, and but the slang is useful for anyone who has the Martian background or has spent any length of time there.